Hey guys, George Mesa, Third Eye Edify podcast. And this episode has been a long time coming. And since I started the show, I was thinking about doing something along these lines, but it wasn't an election year, whatever that means. But this time around, as they say, every single time that I can remember since I was a little kid in the 80s, it's the most important election of all time. Democracy is on the ballot. I don't personally vote. And I was thinking about making this episode just be a don't do it kind of thing, but I'm not really that person, am I? I don't generally like to present that on this show. I rather give information and hope that, well, first of all, that a lot of my audience is expecting this type of demonstration at this point. But hopefully, if you know people that you think need to hear something like this, that you'll pass it along to them no matter where they are as far as voting, no matter how they felt about COVID or anything like that. Because sometimes a conversation like this can help someone who you know is savable in a certain way. They might be able to find a new way out of the matrix, or whatever you want to call it at this point. So my realization that something was wrong with this whole process, and of course, as I do my research, as it often happens, I find out that it's been wrong all along, and there's something very devious about our very specific system here in the USA. I had a substitute teacher, and this was 5th grade. It could have been 4th, but I'm almost positive it was 5th grade. So we're talking about 1987, 88. And instead of giving us what we usually get, because I was still in elementary school, it wasn't junior high, where you go from classroom to classroom and you get different subjects. This one teacher, and now I have to see if it's an election year, because then I might be able to get you a better idea there. Well, 2000 was an election year. 92, 88. It was 1988. Of course it was. It was an election year. So this teacher completely focused on social studies, but he turned it into, and this was a much older person. We were used to having a pretty young, spry teacher at the time, and this person was definitely older. And if my memory serves me well, I would guess easily that he was over 60, maybe even close to 70. So he was pretty staunch and ready to support this whole voting system that he was tricked like everyone else into believing was real and good. God's work, so to speak. He drew a line on the chalkboard, left to right. And he started on the left, mind you, so maybe he was swindling a certain way. But he said, and then he wrote D on the left side, and he wrote R on the right side of this line, of this very, very long chalkboard that could have been easily used for a ton of information, but instead, simple is the way to go, I guess, in this guy's mind. Talking to a bunch of 7-year-olds and 6-year-olds. And he said, here's the line. You're either far left, far right, or somewhere in the middle. And being somewhere in the middle means that you don't know yourself or anyone around you. Word for word here, because I remember it very well. He said, you have to choose a side. You have to choose a side. This is what a teacher told me at 6 or 7 years old. And a class. This person was allowed to step into a classroom with a bunch of young kids and teach. I almost raised my hand. And I speak about things like this in my book. Things that are put in place for young minds to absorb, whether it's intentional or not, whether it harms them or not. It catches a lot of kids. And thankfully, I'm so lucky that I had a mind to realize even then that something was very wrong with that whole situation. What do you mean I have to choose? Now I'm definitely not choosing. Now I don't even want to be a part of this. Making demands. Telling us we have to essentially create enemies on the spot based on the way things go around here. Because nowadays, that decision destroys families. It destroys friendships. And that's me putting it lightly as we get started here. I want to quickly flash the image that I put on the thumbnail that some of you may be familiar with from the 2000 Palm Beach County, Florida elections. Now, this is right before 9/11. Don't look up, right? They were sitting around seeing if the choice that was entered with that ballot was the one that indeed was made. It was pretty much the end of the beginning in my mind. And even back then, I was doing my best to use that to show as many of my friends as possible I had a computer. Computers were already a thing. The internet was already a thing. It was very easy to find a number of pictures on this. It wasn't about grabbing the right newspaper article and finding a very left or right-sided argument based on this incident, whatever you want to call it. I was trying to show people who were basically shaking me by the shoulders to vote. And I was not going to do it. And this is 2000. I was trying to show them this, to say, hey, can you see how ridiculous all this is? This is what you're supporting when you vote. And hopefully I can shake your shoulders a bit if you're on the fence about being on a fence, on one side of the fence or another. But I guess that is my point of this show, just to shake some shoulders here and there. Very lightly, of course, in a friendly way. So my first idea here was to go back as far as I could and find the source of elections. Because even that word elect has some pretty substantial meaning behind it, even in a mythological sense. But more importantly, in a lawful sense lately, and some other things. So where does it all come from? Where and when were the first official elections held? What was their purpose? And how were the elections actually made? Did we cast ballots like we do now? What about that word ballot? Let's check it out. So I think I'll flash this first, right? So this is a picture of a ballot. If you picture the word ballot, the word ball is in there. People would put, and this is an anonymous vote, which is probably for the best, I'd say. They put a white ball in for yes and a black ball in for no. Blackballing is what this is called, as a matter of fact. And that has a very large implication as to just what the first real elections actually were. This was not how it was done. I'm just showing this to get the word blackball on the page right now. You'll also notice some of these balls are gray, and as far as I can tell, this exact style is still performed in Masonic lodges and other places, and they'll often put a black cube or a white ball. So that way, if the whiteness of the ball deteriorates, there's no mistaking the white ball for the black ball. So you get white balls and black cubes, maybe a lot like the one you would see in the Village, if anyone's visited that area, Tribeca in New York. These are called ostraka. This is essentially what the scrap paper of ancient Greece was. We're talking about 5th century BC. All of these are pieces of pottery broken, and now there's names inscribed on them. You may notice the handwriting is very similar, and I thought that as well, and I'll discuss that in a second. Here's a much cleaner look at it. These are obviously just the tops of vases or something of that nature, and here are names, again, same handwriting inscribed on all of them. These are ballots. These are votes. What are they votes for? The very first voting, as far as my research has led, is again from 5th century BC Greece, Athens, of course, the capital. And this was called an ostracism, or ostrakismos, as it says in Greek. ostracism, usually not a good thing. You are ostracized from your society, your group, your church, your home. It's an excommunication, really. And this was the first type of voting, an Athenian democratic procedure. If the quorum was met, that word quorum meaning that a vote has to meet a certain number of votes before it's valid. And in this particular case, there had to be 6,000 votes cast at least, which is a pretty substantial number, I'd say, regardless of the size of the town, city, society, whatever. But any citizen could be expelled from Athens for 10 years. They would be ostracized if enough people voted on them. These votes were very often done preemptively to neutralize someone who was thought to be a threat to the state. Would Plato be proud? I can't say. Having read The Republic a second time pretty recently, I don't necessarily recall hearing about the ostracism, but there was concepts about how to keep people at bay as far as ones who may disrupt the balance of the order. He did keep armies in the city in his ideas. Something worth reading for sure, and I've discussed it in previous episodes. So the reason that the handwriting is the same is that a lot of these people were illiterate. Doesn't mean that they can't make a decision. If someone is a threat to your town or area, maybe they do need to go. But when they're a threat to the state, now we're talking about censorship. And that almost always is not a good thing. So they had a scribe write on these pottery pieces. And that's why the handwriting looked very similar. They would all say what they wanted, hand it to its scribe. A scribe would write this. So much like the issues that have come up in the previous elections, anyone that hopefully you know a little bit about what's been going on with the previous few presidential elections. If you've grown up here, you do. If you're watching this outside of the U.S., I'm sure you have some idea, because it's certainly international headline news when there's a vote going on of this magnitude on the leaders of the free world. There's all these, voting machine problems, electronic voting problems, mail-in voting problems, 2000 Palm Beach County, Florida problems where the dot doesn't look like it belongs in the right box because all boxes are misaligned. It's called the void. I have some pictures of it later. Now we're handing these pieces of pottery to a scribe. People that can't read are handing these pieces of pottery to a scribe. This scribe could be working for the state and could easily be trying to make sure that this threat to the state gets ostracized. So there's a middleman involved in this voting process. That whole black ball, white ball thing with neutral votes, no names on them, essentially. This is clearly a much more substantially easy way to figure out what the society actually felt. If this scribe was doing their best to make sure somebody was being excommunicated, well, then that's what the scribe was going to do. Votes in this scenario could easily be called not important because they said something and walked away. So there's no telling if these were even valid votes at this point. So I think this is just the beginning of it all. And side note that this person that was going to be ostracized for 10 years, they had 10 days to leave, penalty of death if returned within 10 years. Pretty nasty stuff, I would say. But interesting nonetheless, that once again, immediately, as soon as I start my research, I find out that the first system of voting that's ever been documented was a very, very negative thing, looking to get rid of somebody, not to vote somebody into an office, but to actually get rid of somebody. And I think that can really go a long way to anyone that's ever really been on the fence about voting here in the U.S., that is, and still does. It's reality TV at this point. I mean, don't bother. This is my opinion. Don't bother at all. Don't play the game. It is just a game, and it is really actually slavery. It's mental slavery, much like taxation. They let you think you have some kind of power. But the only thing that has power around here, other than us boycotting every system the government has in place at this point, is the government, is the state. So as I was mentioning with the ball ballots, these are also known as secret ballots because the voter is anonymous. They place the ball in, no one sees, in theory. And then you get your vote. How many black balls, how many white balls, done deal. So I think that's a pretty interesting and, again, seemingly more fair. I'm sure there's ways to finagle and make votes work however you'd like. But America's had this as early as the 17th century. And until there was a paper ballot, this is generally how it was done. The first paper ballot in this country was actually to elect a pastor for the Salem church, less than 70 years before the witch trials took place there. So I think, again, it's a strange correlation to make between something so awful, that exact location in the entire realm that we exist in would be the first place to have a paper ballot. And then look what happened not too long afterwards. And this is really just more of the red versus blue, Coke versus Pepsi, white versus black thing on paper, just seeing it black versus white. So it's already choosing a side, choosing a team, so to speak. It creates enemies. It sustains frenemies, and it does lots of other things that aren't necessarily good. And there are other ways. But that's actually not what this episode is about. This is more about what elections have been and why they shouldn't be, especially the way that they are. We have the Electoral College, and we are the only remaining country that does indirectly elected, in other words, not your actual votes, is an indirectly elected executive president who is the head of the state and the government. All other voting nations have switched to a direct voting system by the 20th century. We are the only one left with indirect voting. Our taxes are unapportioned. You can't find out what they do or where they go. Our voting is indirect. Your vote actually doesn't matter, is really what they're trying to tell you. And again, I think it's a very strong reason to avoid it. And when people, a friend sends you a text or some post about this guy saying this about whoever, I'm not even going to say names at this point, just let them know, this is nice and all, but I don't even vote. And I don't think you should either. It's still a really wonderful place to live. And there really isn't a very strong majority of Americans that do vote. And I don't even think it's because they're thinking the way that I'm thinking. I think it's more aligned with the intro that I played with the Monty Python clip. She's saying, he says, I'm your king. And she says, I didn't vote for you. She didn't even know there was a king. I think there's a lot more of that contributing to the lack of voting in this country. There's always this puzzling. Why are there not so many people in the military? Why aren't people voting? I think the answers are usually there. Why are so many people dying of heart attacks? I think that there's very clear answers, and these are just the way that headlines manipulate the masses. If you turn on social media and you scroll for half hour a week, you're more inclined to believe that the whole of society is behaving and feels the way that you saw. It's more impactful on you in that way. And I think that's another big part of the way that they do their thing, because obviously there are less people watching the news. I would say there's still a decent amount of people reading the news, but that is changing too. I know the Washington Post just said they're going back to their roots and not endorsing a president, which is, I'm not even going to continue with that, but they may have lost a few subscribers there. Probably from the left side of that line of chalk that teacher drew for me. So what about the word elect? Or just seeing the word EL on anything? I'd rather kind of get into the elect thing, but interestingly enough, it's not, think of it this way, no longer a noun. It was a noun. Electric was something where it was stored. Electric in amber, for example. You could store electric in amber. Francis Bacon was talking about it, and lots of other people. electric actually was something of potential energy, not something that was using electricity like a TV or a computer or a light bulb like it is now. So once again, there's the inversion of a word. As usual, as expected, we don't even use the word the way we used to. And they're so down on all this electric stuff, but then suddenly we have these battery-powered vehicles. So where do they stand? It's hard to say. And elect, in its official translation, in its official definition as of right now, is one or a group chosen by God. And the God thing does fall into a lot of this. There's still the Bible associated with bringing in a new president as they say their full name, except for Obama, of course, who avoided saying Hussein. Just seeing if anyone's listening. So there was a very interesting one on that. That was quite a choice there. I always picture Zeus with his thunderbolts as he elects to throw them at whoever he feels. You do put your energy into an election, even if your vote actually doesn't matter. You do send your charge into something. It's just like voting with your dollars. It's just like electing to not send your kid to the Department of Education funded little jail cells that they keep your kids in for however many hours so that you can both work and never see your children, for example. So I did put these official definitions, but I didn't really get to use them. The archaic definition of non-conductor used to store electricity like amber versus nowadays something powered by it. Same thing. I basically did get through that actually. So what's going on nowadays? I, of course, found a masked individual doing a mail-in ballot as soon as I looked for mail-in ballot, so I figured I'd flash that. But this is a big factor nowadays. They have these mail-in ballots. Now, handing off a piece of clay to a scribe, you can actually stand there and watch them write what you meant. Still doesn't mean that all the votes are getting counted. I mean, there's still somebody who counts the votes. But these mail-in ballots leave more room for error than anything else. Oh, it never made it. Oh, wait, you were voting with this? Oh, I think that whole entire shipment of ballots got shredded. You just never know. And with the amount of deceased people they keep finding on these voting records, with the amount of non-citizens or people that don't even exist they keep finding voting, I'm just one more reason to have zero confidence in this entire process. Why in the world would the same people that tax a very large portion of your salary and who want to make you pay lots of money for water and health insurance, why in the world would you think for a second that any of these people are even remotely interested in seeing what the hell you have to say about a vote on two reality TV stars, hand-selected out of a group of individuals, just so that they can further divide us? We're already divided financially between the upper and lower class. Middle class is gone. Why would this be any different? Is this making you think about somebody that you know and love, but can't even approach anymore because they don't even want to talk to you? Send it to them. So as a result of those 2,000 Palm Beach County, Florida votes, we get a lot of this. And this person is straining to make sure that he is making doubly positive that the vote cast was the one that was meant to be cast. There are tons and tons of images of people holding these ballots up to the light. You'll see it says Palm Beach on that one. What do you see here? Do you see that this is something that actually happened? Do you see the faces on these individuals? I dare say this isn't even acting. This really happened. If you look at this one in particular, this is where the problem started. If you look between the left and the right page, the lines are not aligned, as you can see. And then there's a dot inside of one spot, but then there's an arrow pointing to another dot, but there's 3 dots within the spot. So it's just madness. Made to confuse, no chance of correction. But then somebody said, hey, this doesn't look very fair. Okay, we'll recount. And what is a recount? It's a great opportunity to fudge the numbers again. Now, this is not the first time this has happened, by the way, of course, and don't think that for a second. It's nothing new happening here. In 1800, a few names you may be familiar with went through something very similar, but elections were a little different back then. Electors in the 1800s, in the USA, of course, and I'm talking about 1800 on the dot, the year 1800, they would cast ballots for two candidates. They would choose two. Whichever two got the most, first and second place would get president and vice president. It wasn't about the president choosing a vice president to join them on their little journey for as much funding as humanly possible to make sure that at least $1 billion come their way before they even get a chance to be voted for. No, it's nothing like that. In 1800s, Jefferson beats Adams, but tied the nominal running mate Aaron Burr. The contingent elections followed, and Jefferson won, but possibly only because the Federalists at the time ultimately considered Jefferson the lesser of two evils. And I hope that this gives a little insight into how they want your mind to be molded when you vote. I'm fairly positive that anyone supporting the idea of a person like Biden as what they show us, the show of Joe Biden, anyone that thinks that is good for us, a good look for us as a country as far as having the strength and the resilience to be a all-powerful nation who can make decisions and trade with the world. I don't really think anyone actually thinks Joe Biden is a good thing on camera. It doesn't look good for us, not a good look. Then we've got huge problem reality star rich person Trump. I don't think he looks very good for anybody either. Father of the vaccine. Go get him. Friend of every war that's happened. Whatever. No big deal. First person I saw interviewed when 9/11 happened, by the way. And then we've got Kamala Harris, who is kind of like Obama, just came out of nowhere, sort of black, maybe not. Can't speak. Totally freaking weird. Seems like she's drugged out all the time. Nobody's winning here. But my point is that they want you to think to yourself, I need to vote. So now I need to, first of all, not choose any of the other candidates available, and I need to choose the lesser of two evils here. I've certainly brought up the point many times in the past about how blue and red are the colors of your blood as they pass in and out of your heart. And when these two colors combine, you get purple, and that was always the color of royalty. They were not voting. There were no votes. You were either purple or you were a peasant. So voting red or blue officially makes you a peasant just at a symbolic level regarding color. The colors are very specific. They're very specific. It's again, it really is reality TV. Oh, I hate that Trump guy. Oh, that Kamala, every time she talks, she's just a demon. Well, who is not a demon in this scenario? You're all being tricked. Everybody is a humongous victim in this game. And to see how much has not changed since 9/11 and how much definitely has not changed since COVID, it's pretty painful to watch as the level of masking rises around me, even an area where people are pretty aware of what's going on, I'd say. As I watch how many of my much younger students are obviously victims of circumstance, it made me think of, in conclusion here, good old Rock the Vote. Check out this footage real quick.
I refer to the political group Rock the Vote in their new spot, which is so awkwardly awful it can make inanimate objects cringe. The concept, withholding sex as a way to promote Obamacare. The ad, posted on funnyorDie.com, features self-satisfied actors Zach Gilford and Eva Amore, encouraging you not to bang anyone who doesn't support health care. To say it blows does a disservice to Wind. Have a look, have-a-lookers.
Get your friends interested. Touch their arms a little. Unbutton.
2/3 of young Americans without health insurance don't get treatment because of cost.
Rock the vote by flirting. Think bigger. Maybe some creep who thinks stuffed panels are real is hitting on you. He's lying to you. You can rock the vote by lying right back.
I'm on my period, and I don't have a vagina.
We pledge ourselves to the health and liberty of young Americans and to government for the people. We pledge to educate ourselves
to stand against those who fight us
with mind, body, and spirit. And to never you if you are against us.
I hope that's a promise.
So it's pretty bad. I mean, the bottom line of that advertisement, and I have much more to discuss with Rock the Vote here if you don't know what it is. Because when Rock the Vote started, it was exactly primed up for me. When I was ready to vote, voting age, I would definitely be doing it. And that's the power of MTV at the time. But this advertisement was clearly stating, if this person isn't voting the way you are, don't have sex with them. How is this even slightly okay? You know what? With the way music videos were around that time and the topics coming up in pop and hip hop and maybe some of that 80s rock, if you think of bands like Poison, I could call it metal. I can't possibly stomach that being called metal, but if you see that, I'd say, yeah, maybe people were primed up for that stuff. So it was founded in 1990 by Virgin Records. And it doesn't mention the owner, who for some reason I can't think of his name right now, but it was founded by their co-chair, Jeff Iroff, a lawyer who promoted rock and pop as a way to promote voting, of course. Rock the Vote, right? So their stated goal was to channel the energy among young people 18 to 24 around racial, economic, and health justice into one of the most powerful actions they can take. You guessed it, voting to an electoral college. Coming soon to an electoral college near you. And this was, by the way, that advertisement you just saw, that was really slated to push Obamacare, which if anyone had messed with that or attempted to, need I say more? But Rock the Vote, in case you weren't 100% sure, there's that logo here. You see MTV's right inside there. I mean, they were playing the game big time. I think Nickelodeon was too, but I couldn't find too much on that. It's probably scratched off the internet because the internet is not free and your votes won't make the internet become what it used to be. That's for damn sure. Here's a picture of Madonna rocking the vote when she was at least somewhat human looking. I don't know what happened to her. It's very unfortunate to see. All I see here are breasts. Is this really an advertisement for voting? I don't know how else to see that. So clearly it was truly sex and rock and roll, not the drugs, to rock the vote. And I specifically remember that, thankfully, I wasn't voting age when this was hitting its stride. But once again, I felt manipulated. I felt coerced by some force. And because I was so into video games and Godzilla movies and TV, I didn't quite realize that the hand was reaching out from the television screen to grab my head like that. I didn't quite feel it that way, but I felt something. I knew there was something going on. And keep in mind, I'm in a generation that we were playing outside all day. It's not like I didn't do that. But when given the choice, or when a new game came out or something, I tried to stay home. Thankfully, my parents pushed me out as much as I could, but not to vote. And I do recall I was working for a hospital about almost 20 years ago now. And somebody was, I guess it was McCain Obama, I guess. Was it? I don't even care. Okay, so, but I think it was McCain Obama. I guess it was for 2008, right? Because it couldn't have been for 2004 because I wasn't working there at that time. So I guess it was 2008. And this person who I thought was really cool and I really, respected, I was a courier driving around. So I didn't get to hang out in the office with my coworkers. I saw them for very small snippets of time that I'd see them at a mutual station or something. And this person and I could tell that something, kind of nasty was going on. They were already having like a very verbal and very like body language heavy conversation that wasn't looking good. And then I finally got to listening distance, and the point came, this is your fault. You voted this in. Obama won, right? It's not going to help. It's not going to help anybody to bother with this stuff. It's still just a really wonderful place to live and grow. It is actually the land of opportunity in a lot of ways, as long as you find ways to skirt the ways that they tell you should reach these opportunities. You can find plenty of stuff here, especially now that we've all been pushed online by COVID. The opportunities to be with your family at home have really skyrocketed in a lot of ways. And it's not just because of, Etsy or social media. It's every business. Every single business. You can avoid things like a storefront for most jobs at this point. I mean, there's certain things you need a store for, but your house can be your store. And there's lots of ways to see lots of things, and there's plenty more to discuss here, but I think overall, the main takeaway is that there's been problems with elections from the start. We are the last country with indirect elections. Your vote actually doesn't count. The same men that want to dictate women's birth care are the same men that are making the elections choices, as far as they're telling us. Let's just be very frank and put the obvious word out there that the selection for each president is potentially determined for 20-ish years, I would say. Much the way that you were born a king, as people may think in England or France. I would very easily suspect that many presidents we've had in the past 40 years were born into this for very specific reasons. If you don't breed someone like cattle to become this, they're not going to do it. You essentially need somebody perfect in front of that camera. And the illusion of what goes on, it is Hollywood magic. Hollywood was a great way to practice how much camera can affect somebody. Do you think they're speaking from the Oval Office? How the fuck do you know? It's really hard to tell nowadays. And it's not because of AI. AI is very old at this point. This is not about that at all. And if you've watched any of these AI clips, they're not there yet. There's always something missing. There's always something wrong. So, who knows? There's plenty of very deep conspiracies to mention regarding what the president may or may not be, but I don't even know if it's a human being at this point. It's crazy, but it's hard to tell. It's hard to believe that a human can get up there and say that everyone needs to take experimental shots. Everyone needs to support wars. Everyone is safer and better off because of them. Can you imagine how you would have to be raised to actually believe what you're saying in those regards? How's that for reality TV? Thanks a lot, guys. I apologize for the long delay between this and the last one, but I've got some very exciting interviews coming up and plenty more. Thank you so much for everyone that is supporting me through Patreon, through Rockfin. You know who you are. And again, if there's somebody who you think needs to hear this, and maybe I'm the one that can reach them. I'm sure that you've tried before. You never know. You never know whose voice or whose hair it'll take to get someone's mind changed about something so simple. And the less that do it, perhaps something will change. Doesn't mean it's for the better or worse, but the illusion of elections, I really do hope will dissipate as soon as possible. Thank you so much, guys. See you next time.